Just as a serpent sheds his skin, so must the world be cleansed of sin.
Mr. Caldwell, hello?
So that the next renewal can begin.
Smells like something died in here. Let's just get out of here. This whole thing is weird.
I don't know what it is about this house. I have to stay.
We release you, Lord Octana. We, the guardians of the long night, are your humble servants. Instruct us.
They were in my head.
Why are we really here?
For 5,000 years, the serpent has been the great equalizer, cleansing the evils of man from the world with his venom.
This ends now. What the hell do you want from me?
Don't you wish to be free of your pain?
Jesus.
The long night begins.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike, and joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom? How are you?
Greetings and salutations, disciples. I see everyone brought their skull masks to the meeting, so let us begin. Yes, how the hell are you, Mike? I'm doing pretty well.
I am doing well. Also, I don't know. I don't really have much to add. Just another Monday in my world, and it's over with. At least the workday is over with. So ready to get into the latest episode and the movie. And yeah, so I'll introduce our other co-host, Don and Ellie. How are you doing, Don?
Yeah, great to be here and hopefully kick this bad luck streak we've had.
All right, we'll see about that. The movie we are hopefully breaking the cycle with is The Long Night. And it looks like, according to IMDb, the original title was The Coven. Mm-hmm. Wasn't aware of that. I mean, I remember seeing this pop up a little while ago.
Yeah, that's I saw at least two different films last year for screener releases just called Coven or The Coven or Coven of something, and it's like, ugh. Yeah.
No witches here, so no Coven.
Well, not only that, it's just so generic because, I mean, not just last year, but I mean, I've seen or heard of at least 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A very common title.
All right, so the synopsis is as follows, as listed by IMDb, of course. A devoted couple's quiet weekend takes a bizarre turn when a nightmarish cult and their maniacal leader come to fulfill an apocalyptic prophecy. I believe prophecy is spelled wrong on the IMDb synopsis, but hey.
Oh, shit, you're right. It is spelled wrong. That's awesome. Oh, and by the way...
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, a devoted couple? What movie were they watching?
Yeah. So sometimes when I'm reading like a synopsis or just, reading something out loud, it's like I'll get halfway into the word, or, you how your eyes are kind of like a half second ahead of what you're reading. Yeah. And like it trips me up because I'm like, wait, is this a different word that I'm about to pronounce wrong? But I was like, no, they just misspelled it. This one directed by Rich Ragsdale. That can't be a real name, can it? Rich Ragsdale. Stars Scout Taylor
I think it is.
Compton.
I think it is. I think it is. There's several. He's done several other films in the past, so this isn't the first film he's done. He actually worked with Scout on. He actually worked with Scout on an earlier film called Ghost House from 2017.
Yeah. Well, we reviewed that on the horror cast. I remember.
It sounds like a game show host name.
Ragsdale.
Rich Ragsdale.
I mean, he
Um,
directed one. Did he direct this movie? No, he did the score for one of my favorite creature features, Eight-Legged Freaks.
All right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's his actual name, but yeah, that I know that he's done several other jobs in the past.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Scout Taylor Compton. She should be pretty familiar. Was she in one of Rob Zombie's Halloween movies?
She was in all of Rob Zombie's Halloween movies.
Okay.
She's Laurie Strode, for fuck's sake.
I mean, I saw those like once.
Yeah,
and
me
I haven't
too.
seen them since. Yeah.
And the memory is the bad memory is so ingrained in my head that it'll never get out of there. Ugh.
Yeah, because like I feel like her name is one of those names in the genre. Like I've heard the name more than I think I've seen movies she's been in.
Yeah.
And like honestly, right now the thing I know her most for is the podcast she's doing with Danielle Harris. I don't know if you guys have ever heard it. It's called like Talk Scary to Me, I think.
Nope.
Podcasts
it's kind of
like
stupid.
Yeah, I know. Who would start one of those these days?
Yeah, I have stories.
Keep them going or what?
Well, no, I'm just saying I thought it would be more like behind the scenes stories of them on the sets and stuff, and they're talking like their sex lives and stuff. And
yeah, it's pretty like.
I mean, it's not
graphic.
bad listens, but it's not necessarily what I wanted. It's not necessarily like what I wanted from them. Like I thought that they would be on the set stuff, and they get like co-hosts on board, and they have them tell stories and stuff like that. Like I thought that was kind of what the show was going to be, and then it just turned into like their personal lives and like a sex diary and stuff. So I haven't really gotten like very deep into it, but it's not a bad listen for what it is. I'm just kind of like I've got other stuff to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like like you said, like their personal life sex stories, and they have people write in questions, and then like about halfway through every episode, it turns into like a true crime show. I mean, I guess on the bright side, like for people that are like, oh, I might want to check it out. The episodes are only about an hour, so like if you put it on 1.5, which is what I usually listen to all podcasts on now, it's like it takes a half hour for me to get through an episode. So, so yeah, that's I guess our highlighting our podcast this week.
If you can call that a highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a half endorsement at least. All right, so general, yeah, I think, yeah, we already did synopsis and all that. So yeah, The Long Night, I will start with general thoughts as always. So I'll kick it to Venom. What did you think of The Long Night?
Okay, many of you may already know this, but just in case you don't, I want everyone to take everything that I say about this movie today with a grain of salt. I say that because I genuinely love cult movies. I adore them. I think they're one of my favorite. Next to supernatural horror, cult horror is probably my favorite subgenre. So I do tend to be a little bit forgiving with some of these movies. So like I said, take my kind of opinion with a grain of salt. Bounce that off of what Don and Mike say, and develop your own idea of whether you want to watch this movie or not. So here we go, The Long Night 2022. And yes, as I stated with my warning, I actually do enjoy this movie. The reason I wanted to caveat this was because this movie is getting terrible reviews, like absolutely terrible reviews. It's hovering at around a 3 on IMDb. And I understand most of the gripes that people have with this movie. I mean, there's nothing original about it. It's a lot of been there, done that. Nothing too special. There's no set pieces in it that are, exceptionally memorable. There's, to me, it's just a very solid movie. I think this movie nails the atmosphere. It nails the tone of the film. It's got a great score. It's got some really good cinematography, some really cool imagery throughout the film too, obviously involving the cult. And then one of the biggest complaints I heard about this film was the ending. Like a lot of people are not real high on this ending. I actually really enjoyed this ending. When we get to the spoiler section, I'll talk about why I tend to like endings like this. This movie kind of reminded me of I Trapped the Devil from a couple of years ago, where that ending of that film was also very contentious among the community. And that was another one that I absolutely loved. In fact, that movie almost made my top 10 that year. I think it was like in the top 15 for whatever year that was released. But yeah, this one, like I said, it's nothing special. It's a little bit of a slower burn, especially for the first half. It's a little slower. It does get tropey, especially one of the biggest tropes that I can't stand, and that's the shitty significant other in a horror movie, and we get plenty of that in this one. Well, he's not the worst significant other I've ever seen in a horror movie, but he has his moments where he's just a complete douchebag, and the horror trope number 411. So what the hell can you do? So, despite all of its shortcomings, despite its pacing issues, despite some less than memorable performances, like I said, I had a really good time with this movie. I enjoyed the cult. I enjoyed the way that they dressed, which again, very been there, done that. Black robes, and all the members have a different like mask on. Some of them are just like cloth masks. Other people have like animal skulls over their face or whatever. So, like I said, most people are going to look at this and think, I've seen this before. It's nothing special. And I will 100% agree with that. But for me to be able to watch a 90-minute movie, not get frustrated at all throughout the film, maybe once or twice with the shitty boyfriend, but again, that's kind of expected for the character. But, like I wasn't questioning character decisions. I wasn't rolling my eyes at terrible line deliveries. And I definitely didn't walk away from the film unsatisfied because of a perceived underwhelming ending, as the internet seems to look at it. So, overall, I'm going to say, this isn't a top 10 contender by any stretch. I'm not going to say that I loved this movie. I'm generally not a fan of Scout Taylor Compton, namely because her biggest claim to fame is the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, or are the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. And I'm not the biggest fan of those films. And I'm not the biggest fan of anybody in those films as far as their performances within those films. So, but I have kind of gotten to see some of her stuff more recently that I did enjoy. I still haven't seen anything with her that I love. But I will say Ghost House was pretty decent from 2017. Penance Lane from 2020. She co-starred with Taylor Maine. I thought that was a pretty decent movie. Again, none of these movies are revolutionary. None of them are 10 out of 10s. But I wouldn't necessarily call any of them bad either. They're all moderately enjoyable. And I'm going to say the same thing about The Long Night. It was moderately enjoyable. I was satisfied with it. I don't know if it's a movie I'll ever return to, but I did enjoy the story, and like I said, all the technical aspects are there. It's a fine movie as far as how its filmmaking techniques. I already mentioned score, cinematography. It's got some decent direction, some good editing. Overall, it's just a solid film that's just a little underwhelming for the majority of the horror community. This movie is probably going to fall short for them. For somebody like me who kind of likes the more subtle aspects of horror, this one works for me in many ways. But, like I said, it's not a top 10 candidate by any stretch, but it's definitely something that I'll defend when people talk about its 3.5 score on IMDb, because that's just, to me, that's an absolute crime. I mean, what can you do? Opinions, everyone's opinion is valid. And that's the whole point of rating these movies. And that's the whole point of thousands of people rating these movies on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, is to get a more concise score. This movie obviously hasn't been out that long. It's only got less than 1,000 reviews. So hopefully as more eyes get on it, and older eyes too, because I feel like maybe older horror fans are going to enjoy this a little bit more. Like I said, the slower pace, the bleak ending, things like that. So overall, if you're a cult horror fan or a Scout Taylor Compton fan, I would say this is a recommend from me.
Okay, so we got one vote to break the streak. Dawn, what about you? What did you think of The Long Night?
Well, as the person that suggested this one, I'm gonna come in pretty much where Venom is. I'm not the biggest fan of Scout. Much like him, I'm not the biggest fan of her glory day films, so to speak. I actually prefer her in Wicked Little Things, which I think was released just before the original Halloween was, maybe like a year or so or earlier in the year. I actually much prefer her in that one. She did much better there. Um, and it's actually kind of glad to see her not being a high school teenager, because I saw one released last year where she is literally a 33-year-old high school student that has crow's feet rather than the teacher. So no, I am not literally. I'm not making that up. She's older
I
than.
believe.
Yeah, she's older than the teacher, and yeah, she plays a high school student in a film released last year. So yeah, it was good to see her in this kind of a role. I had a lot of fun with it. There's, like you said, nothing special about it, nothing original. It's not exactly, the biggest claim to, originality, so to speak, but much like him, I enjoyed where it went. I liked a lot of the interactions between the cult and the two of them. It feels a little weird in the sense that the cult is as overpowered, to use the term, as they are, and yet they don't necessarily showcase that to the extent that they could have. It just feels as if the cult could have gone in earlier and taken care of business at a much quicker pace. Um, Especially once you see just how quickly, once they do start approaching the house, how quickly they do take over. So it feels a little weird that they kind of just we never really get much about them, which is kind of like the other real thing about them, because all we get is this kind of symbolical mumbo jumbo and this kind of connection to this demon thing that these pilgrims found in the 1500s when they originally landed here. But that's like at the final 10 minutes, and you don't really get much of anything else until then, which is understandable because it's not focusing on them, it's focusing on the couple and their drive to survive. But even still, I kind of would have wished that there would have been a little bit more about the cult and their powers and what they're trying to do. That is kind of a small little gap in the film, but other than that, yeah, it's not overly flashy. It's not overly original. It's not overly creative, but it's enjoyable enough. I don't mind the pacing. I think it's 93 minutes. Maybe shave a couple of the useless interactions at the beginning off. Maybe give one or two scenes of the boyfriend being an asshole, rather than, just constantly shoving it down her throat, because yes, like Venom, I'm kind of sick and tired of this trope. Why are you even boyfriend and girlfriend if you're, fighting the way you are? Like, that makes no sense. Yeah, that one or two instances, get the idea, brush it aside and move along. But yeah, especially compared to the last couple of films, I'm not saying that this gave it any higher credence, but I enjoyed it a lot more than them, so I think this one kind of stands out just a little bit more. Again, not even going to sniff my top of the year, but it's not going to be anywhere near the bottom. So I'm going to say mild recommend, maybe higher, like Venom said, if you're a fan of the genre or you appreciate this kind of film. But other than that, I wouldn't say it's a priority watch, but looking to fill out your ranks and boost your totals up and say I watched so and so films from the year, you could do a lot worse, because we certainly have.
All right. So for me, I am gonna come in like, how can I put it? I'm honestly lower than you guys, but I didn't dislike it really. I think it's a middle of the road movie. I tend to like cult movies as well. I guess my main problem with this one is the cult was there, but that's about all they were for most of the movie. There was, I can't really get into too much of it until spoilers, but I kept waiting for like them to do something, like anything. I think did I say it before we were recording or in our intro when it comes to Scout Taylor Thompson or Scout Taylor Compton? I know of her. Obviously I've seen her in a couple things before. I'm not overly familiar with her, but I thought she was fine in this. I mean, I don't have a ton to compare. You guys were listing off way more stuff than I can ever recall even seeing, so I didn't have a ton to compare to as far as just her acting, but I thought she was fine in this role. It's a smaller movie. There's not a lot of heavy lifting to do, I would say. But yeah, the movie was kind of tropey. I think it was like your typical lower budget where they didn't want to get the story too big. It's a very self-contained, smaller cult story. I thought it played out fine. I would have liked to see a little more happen through the course of the movie. But story-wise, it pretty much follows the trajectory that you would expect. I think it's fairly how can I put it? I don't know if I'd go as far as to say obvious, but I think you can pretty much figure out like what the cult's intention is not too far into the movie. Once they're kind of there, and just little signs you pick up on, especially with I guess a certain character getting flashbacks and all sorts of weird nightmares and stuff. It's like, okay, I think they obviously have something to do with this person, and we'll see how it plays out. And then one that did, it's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. It's just okay, it's just a very familiar story. Like Don said, it's not going to be anywhere close to a top 10 type movie, and I don't think it needed to be a 3.5 on IMDb. It's not. I for that kind of rating, I was expecting a much worse movie. But yeah, I would say this one's it's middle of the road. I don't think. I guess depending on what you're expecting going in, it could be disappointing. But it's kind of, I don't know. It's like it's that middle ground of like, I wasn't disappointed, I wasn't overly enthused. It was just kind of there. Watched it, and it was okay. Maybe because I have an affinity for cult movies too, that I gave it more benefit of the doubt than maybe I would on other similar movies. But yeah, it was okay movie. So definitely sounds like I'm lower on it than you two guys, but I did not like it. So, and that was a double negative that I just used. Yeah. I didn't dislike it. Yeah, I'm trying to walk a fine line because I'm not. I don't think I'm endorsing it so much as you guys, but I'm also like, it's not terrible. It's kind of falls in that category of like, yeah, if you're short on stuff to watch for 2022, or you just like the cult subgenre of horror, I would say watch, but definitely not a priority, something that you need to get to or anything. So I guess, use that combined with what Venom and Dawn said to guide you best. Mm-hmm. If you listen to us for that guidance. If not, then we can go fuck ourselves, I guess. But I mean,
it's really
general thoughts at that.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of, do you like basic cult movies? Like, this is not an exceptional cult movie. This is one of those middle of the ground cult movies that, it doesn't try anything new. It doesn't, the set pieces aren't anything revolutionary that we've never seen before. There's not an abundance of blood or, a lot of effects or anything like that. So it's just a very simple cult film. It's this little movie. And I think if that description works for you, if that sounds like something you might enjoy, then I would recommend it. I would absolutely recommend it. But otherwise, if you're a gorehound, or if you're looking for a lot of supernatural or, cult action, maybe something like Jackals from a couple of years ago, then this movie's not it.
Yeah, I think that's part of why, even though overall I would say I was lower on it, I didn't dislike it as much, or I didn't dislike it, but I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to cult movies in general is just because they tend to have either some type of rich story to them, or at least there's some type of mystery element to them, as far as the folklore around the cult, where this is very minimal. It's we learn early on, yes, there's a cult and they're there for something, But as the movie goes on, it just literally feels like, yeah, they're there just to remind us, oh, hey, there's a cult there, and we
Yeah,
don't really learn much. The
well,
character doesn't really go through much. It's just very minimalist, so that's
yeah, that's
why
kind of
it's just middle of the road for me.
yeah, that was what I was saying about, we get the revelation like in the last 10 minutes about why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, yeah, like what Mike's saying, like that's, like one of my problems is that's, one of the big issues is that you don't know what they're there for until the end. So it just seems like, okay, they're this powerful. Look how fastly they wiped every, they once they actually started to approach the house and attack it. Look how quickly they overran them. Why wouldn't they do that earlier? Like you don't get anything about.
Yeah,
I
that was a point too, because I was waiting for spoilers, but I guess that's still vague enough where I was like, okay, they're pretty sizable compared to any resistance there. So I was like, well, if this is what they're actually here to do, what's with all the standing around for like the first two acts of the movie?
Have you guys
Like,
never seen
just
a cult
do
movie?
it.
What the hell? I'm gonna vehemently disagree with Mike on this point because I personally think the best cults do less. One of my favorite cult movies of the last few years is 2017's The Void. What did that cult do? They literally stood around holding knives.
Well, it's not that they just stood there. It's we still got to know a little bit about what they were there for. We still got information on them. So it made it a
True.
little bit less it made it less obvious that that's all they were doing. Plus they were still able to, they still launched attacks inside the house.
Sure.
Inside the hospital. You were still able to, get some set pieces without them actually being involved. So I think the fact that there's very little action and confrontation here, I think that makes it a little bit more obvious.
Okay. Well, like I said, I guess I just look at cult movies a little bit differently because for me, the fear in cult movies is not knowing what they want, not knowing what they're about, not knowing who they're after. I think that's the fucking fear. Yeah, we could get the story served to us on a silver platter, and it might satisfy a lot of people. But I like that mystery. That's part of the reason I like this movie is that we don't get the reveal of what this cult is doing until the very end. I know a lot of times I kind of bitch about that, but
I
in
don't.
this
I didn't
particular
necessarily
movie,
want. Yeah, I didn't necessarily want like their whole purpose
oh no,
revealed to
I'm
me
not.
right away.
I'm not throwing around accusations. I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. Please don't ever think I'm doing that. I am definitely not. What I'm saying is I look at cult movies apparently a little bit differently. I don't care that they don't do anything. The fear is the fact that they're not doing anything. Because if they just run roughshod over the house, yeah, that's scary, but for a much smaller amount of time. Them standing outside surrounding the house with torches in some of their hands, like to me, that's just the nature of fear, just the lack of knowledge, like if they would have found let's say they would have found a book or something in the basement that gave the whole history of the cult or something, it takes the mystery away. And then you have to rely on other things. You have to rely on more over-the-top set pieces to entertain your audience. Well, if you leave that mystery in there a little bit longer, the reveal is the entertainment. It is the payoff, if you will, at the end. And I do understand that this movie doesn't have as much of a payoff as a lot of these slow burn films. Obviously Mike and I both loved Saint Maud from last year, an incredibly slow burn, but with an absolutely frantic last 5 to 10 minutes of the film, whereas this one is not that at all. So, like I said, I understand people's issues with it, but I don't. All I'm saying is that I kind of mildly disagree with my co-host today on this one. I like the fact that they didn't give me anything. I love the way they looked. I mean, I know they're a fairly basic bitch cult, with their black robes and their animal skulls, but you know what? It's an image that works. It's an image that's terrifying, and if you're alone in a house and you're surrounded by people like that, that's not exactly a day at Disneyland. That's fucking terrifying. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily trying to disagree actively with Mike and Don. I'm just saying that in this particular instance, the fact that we didn't get that explanation actually worked for me. Totally. It just totally worked for me. And I know I'm going to be in the minority on this one. I absolutely, reading the reviews, looking at the IMDb scores, looking at Rotten Tomatoes, it's very obvious that the majority of the community is looking down at this film, and that's fine. Like I said, to each their own. But yeah, I want to make sure that people like me know about this movie, because this is a movie that might have gone by had we not had a newer film, or excuse me, had we had a newer film to look at this week, I may not have ever watched this film. I may not have ever laid eyes on it, and I'm glad I did, because I enjoyed the entire hour and a half that I spent with it. And ultimately, as I've already said 6 times, I am very satisfied with that ending. I like bleak endings. They don't need to be the most over-the-top, gore-filled things, though when that does happen, great. But the point is, you don't always need it. So, like I said, I understand the people's gripes with this movie. Obviously, I read about 24 reviews on IMDb, all of them bad. Very few people seem to be as positive on this film as I am, and that's understandable. I'm my own person, and I'll die on this hill that this movie is very watchable. It's just you have to be a certain kind of horror fan. That's all. Your average 24-year-old Scream fan is probably not going to gravitate towards this film, and that's fine. But a 60-year-old fan of The Wicker Man might actually enjoy this film. So take it with like I said earlier, take it with a grain of salt, but I enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, with that said, I think we can get into our spoiler section.
All right. Well, not a whole hell of a lot to this movie. Basically, we're introduced to Scout Taylor Compton's character, Grace Covington. That fucking name. And get this, she's an orphan. She's an orphan with the name Grace Covington. Sounds like she's an heiress, in my opinion, but whatever. She has a boyfriend named Jack, who is a very, like a GQ model, handsome guy, like hair perfectly done. He drives an Audi. His clothes are perfectly pressed, that kind of guy. He's obviously an upper management type person, because there's one scene in the movie where we see him yelling into his cell phone at somebody and threatening to fire them. So he's obviously some kind of upper management type. And he's got money. So, instantly he's hateable. And, like I said, right away, we kind of see the relationship between these two. The movie starts out with them being fairly happy, talking about Scout, who, as I mentioned, is an orphan. She recently received some information that could potentially lead her to her birth parents. She decides to look into that information, which is what leads her to this part of the country and this particular house, which apparently may have belonged to her family. She's not 100% sure, because she never does. She never does end up connecting with the guy that she spoke to on the phone. He just, we find him later, but we'll get to that. So Jack and Grace travel from Jack's parents' house, where Grace just met his parents for the first time. She is upset with Jack because obviously she is an orphan and Jack is rich. So obviously you could see where parents might have an issue with their, rich heir child, dating basically an orphan woman with nothing to bring to a marriage or a family, as far as finances anyway. And they're basically, going back and forth how he didn't defend her, and basically Jack didn't say anything when the parents made negative comments about Grace, blah, 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 blah. At this point, they decide to go about the second half of their trip, which is to go to this house, that the aforementioned house that may have something to do with their family. When they arrive, before they get to the house, they obviously, in a movie like this with city slickers going into the country, of course you have to have the gas station scene, where the city folk go in and the country folk have a little interaction. Luckily, this one was a lot more watchable. Like, it didn't frustrate me. We didn't have like rednecks, throwing insults or threats at the city folk, and the city folk weren't talking down to the country folk. So definitely could have been a lot more painful than it was, so I'll give the movie credit for that. This is what I'm talking about, folks, is that the slightest things frustrate me with horror movies, and very little about this movie frustrated me. I'm not going to sit here and say that this was a great movie, But the fact that I could sit for an hour and a half and watch a horror movie where I never rolled my eyes once, I never got mad at any characters, I never got frustrated in any situations, to me, that was a good time. So that's why I'm giving this movie a positive review. Anyway, after our two lovebirds leave the gas station, Grace ends up getting a call from the owner of the house that she is going to, basically letting her know that he may not be at the house when they arrive. Go ahead and grab the spare key from under the flower pot. Help yourself, go ahead and go into the house, make yourself at home. I'll be home as soon as I possibly can. But this is a horror movie, so we all know where this is going. Grace and Jack get to the house. Indeed, the key is underneath the flower pot. They make themselves welcome into the house, and their host is nowhere to be found. In fact, they even mention at one point when Jack and Grace go into the bedroom, the room that they think they'll be sleeping in that night, Jack actually makes a comment about an odd odor emanating from the room. Keep that in the back of your head. And then out of nowhere, it's just cult members. That's one of the things. That's another thing I like about this movie is that they don't make us wait for very long. It's a 90-minute movie, and it's not like they made me wait 45 minutes to see a cult member. No, they get here fast. Basically, as soon as the sun goes down, we got cult members surrounding the house. We have some different interactions with Jack and Grace kind of sneaking around the house, going out to different windows, going out the back door to see if there's other ways out. Unfortunately, all exits have been covered by the cult. And as we mentioned in the non-spoiler section, they are your basic looking cult, black robes, animal skulls. Some of them have fabric masks or just like a black fabric just draped over their face, things like that. So the masks kind of vary. They do have a distinct leader that they call the Master. And this is the one that's almost like their representative, the one who actually gives commands. And it's the only member of the cult that actually speaks at any point in the film. Basically, we just have these different scare scenes where cult members, get into the house. Our two characters are able to kind of thwart their advances and get to another safe or different part of the house away from the cult. Eventually, at one point, a friend of the owner of this house named Wayne shows up, and lo and behold, it's the goddamn lawnmower man. Yes, Jeff Fahey is the Wayne. He shows up at the house. Obviously, he doesn't recognize Grace or Jack. And he did not see the cult. Somehow the cult had the house surrounded.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, there was nobody there. Like literally they looked out the window and there was no cult members. So obviously you start to think it's a red herring that, oh shit, he's one of the cult members just masquerading as a normal person or whatever. But no.
I gotta say, to be honest, like when he enters the movie, like shows up at the house and that whole scene from there on until he ultimately meets his fate, I was really digging it. I thought he like kind of injected a shot of just awesome into the movie. Maybe because it's just Fahey and I got a kick out of seeing him in this movie. But I just enjoyed that whole scene of him being like, "Who the hell are you people?" And them trying to explain, and that whole kind of like tension going on, which leads to him, going outside and then actually, okay, holy shit, there is a cult there, and then they kind of are on the same side now because hey, the cult seems like after all of us now. So I thought that whole sequence was cool. Yeah,
the whole sequence was cool, but I'm actually going to be the opposite of Mike on this one. I do not like Jeff Fahey. I am not a fan of just about any of his movies. Lawnmower Man, Body Parts, all crap to me. But he doesn't. I mean, obviously he's so much older now that he barely looks like Jeff Fahey. He's got gray hair, gray beard. He's obviously a larger man. As he got older, he got a little bit bigger. So the fact that he didn't remind me of Jeff Fahey makes me love this scene. And it's Mike said that, he interjected a bit of awesome for the duration of the movie that he was in. Unfortunately, he's only in the movie for like 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Because literally, as soon as he gets there, he talks down the couple because obviously they're both armed, not with firearms, but Jeff Fahey has a pipe and Jack has a fireplace poker, and they're kind of at a Mexican standoff because nobody knows who the other one is. Once they settle everything down and he starts to kind of believe what's going on, he goes outside to get something out of his truck, to get his phone. That's what it was. He goes to get his phone. Unfortunately, this cult has some kind of signal jammers because they basically, no phone, either the landline in the house or any cell phones seem to work in this area. They all just get a lot of static and everything, even though like people will talk about, well, I just had full bars, blah, blah, blah. What's going on? They don't actually show us that. It's really more implied that the cult has this ability, and it could be a supernatural ability. Who knows? Maybe it's not like an actual technological advancement that they have. Maybe it's something else. So, like I said, after Jeff Fahey's character Wayne goes out to the truck to get his phone, he realizes that the phone isn't working. Then he looks around and he sees cult members for the first time. Then he's like, okay, these two kids in the house are telling the truth and we're in danger. So he goes back into the house to get his pipe. Excuse me. They go back into the house to get the homeowner's shotgun. Wayne, the neighbor, he knows that this guy has a 12-gauge shotgun in the house somewhere, and they go around looking for it to find it. When they finally go up to the aforementioned bedroom where Jack and Grace are staying, they look in the closet to see if the shotgun is there, and there is the neighbor, deader than shit. Just looking very much like a Samara victim from The Ring, just gray and a fucked up look on his face. So we find the owner of the house. The kids now understand why he didn't answer the door when they got there, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Wayne has a little bit of a mental breakdown because, this guy's his friend. He's now looking at his friend's dead body. He ends up just grabbing a pipe and, like an absolute madman, just going outside and confronting a good half dozen to a dozen cult members that are standing in front of the house. He picks up the pipe, he rears back with his right hand to hit the master, the main cult leader, with the pipe. And the cult leader just raises their hand. And you can see Jeff Fahey freeze, just absolutely freeze. He can't move. And then we get that cool thing where the cult member will kind of twitch a finger and one of Fahey's bones will crack. And then they'll flick another finger and another limb cracks. And literally, like, his arms and legs are all broken and he's just on the ground trying to crawl away. And that's when the rest of the cult members pull out these long knives, almost like daggers, like not quite swords, not quite knives, but, dagger type things, and basically stab the shit out of Jeff Fahey. I counted at least 30 to 35 stab wounds. I mean, they killed the shit out of him. And to his credit, he still had some breath in him when they were done. Obviously, he took his last breath as the cult members were standing there. But good on Jeff Fahey. He took a lot before he went down, so I'll give him that. And then after this, there's a couple of more like little set pieces with some cult members trying to get into the house. I'm not going to get into all of those because if you've ever seen a cult movie where they, take a house captive, you kind of seen it all before. It's nothing too terribly original. But then we get to the reveal of the cult. And as it turns out, this cult worships a god named Uktina. Uktina is a snake god. They actually give a pretty decent little backstory. I actually have it down here in my notes that Uktina's backstory is actually mildly interesting. Again, it's not going to change the world. It's not the most original thing we've ever seen, but it is a snake god, which I kind of like. I like snakes, so it's not that we get any images of the god. We get some animated images, like some drawings and things like that, but nothing cool looking. So then, like I said, we get the reveal of that, and then finally the cult decides, well, fuck it, we're done screwing around with this couple. They basically just take over the house. They go into the house, and they actually have Jack and Grace both kind of cornered in the basement. And this is when we get the reveal of the master, the leader of the cult, taking their animal head skull off. And it is a woman. Yes, the leader of this cult is a woman. We don't ever
what a
find
swerve.
Yeah, what a swerve. Well, that's not the biggest swerve. I'll get to that one. Well, actually, we got like a 2 or 3 actually to go over with this whole reveal.
Yeah.
So like I said, the Master is a woman who, very much does have supernatural powers. Like, this is not a perceived, power necessarily. Like that, she can actually. I mean, what she did to Jeff Fahey's character was pretty rad. So obviously, this is a pretty badass cult leader. And then we get the second reveal that, the Master is Mama. Yes, the parents who gave up Scout or Grace, Scout Taylor Compton's character, are the Master, and then her father is a character named King Orba, who, I mean, doesn't have any name, doesn't have any lines in the movie. He's basically just a naked cult member who has like a ram's head on his, a ram's skull on his head. And then they actually show a scene where we've all seen Scout Taylor Compton naked at this point, so you could tell it's her body. But I think that they were implying those were her parents. That's just me. Like, it seemed like because they actually.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah,
at least what I was getting from it without them implicitly saying so.
Exactly. Like I said, we've all seen Scout Taylor naked, so we kind of know what she looks like at this point. Bravo, by the way. So we know it's her, but like I said, what we see is Scout's naked body, but wearing another animal skull. So we don't see her face. And then we see this other character with like a ram's head on his head, and he's butt naked. And they do this weird thing where we see the shot from looking down at the female, and she spreads her legs, and this bright light comes out from in between her legs, from basically from her crotch, which then kind of fades into a shot back to present day of Scout speaking to her mother. So that's kind of why I got that impression that was like Grace's conception, I guess, if you will, would be the best way to put it. And they basically explain that a child of the cult has to be used to manifest the god into a physical form so that they can leave the property. Basically, the god was trapped on this property, this particular farmland, eons ago, if you will, hundreds of years ago. And so basically they can't leave the perimeter of the farm without a human host, and that human host has to be a child of the cult. Of course, Grace has now been revealed to be a child of the cult. So, of course, at this point, the Master recites some, I don't know if it's Latin or Sumerian, but some kind of foreign language, ancient language, I should say. She spouts off like an incantation of some kind, and then we see Scout Taylor kind of start to writhe in pain and, roll around the floor, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly out of nowhere, she stops and she just gets up, and you can tell that there's something different about her demeanor, the way she's carrying herself, things like that. At this point, the Master drops down on her knees and says, "Master, you are free. What would you have of us? What should we do with you?" And this is the thing that always gets me in cult movies, when these cult disciples, the disciples of this particular god, that they actually think that they're going to get rewarded or something for all of their efforts. It's like, really? Do you not know the backstory of your god? Because as soon as Scout Taylor's character Grace stands up, and you can, and her eyes are a little bit milky, you can kind of see that milky effect on her eyes. She instantly just, I mean, she's basically just staring at the Master, and then we see like just flashes of, like, the screen will flash different colors, like just really briefly, like for a split second. And every time it happens, you can see that the Master is in more and more pain until eventually she drops dead. She's just completely dead. You see the cult members. See, that's a kill that could have been a lot better. This was a pretty underwhelming kill for this film, considering this is the Master, this is the leader of this cult, someone who's personally responsible for Lord knows how many deaths in this area, trying to, get this vessel for their god. And what does the god do? Basically just lets her die of what really just seems like a heart attack. She literally just keels over. But then you kind of see the rest of the cult members are standing there, and you kind of see them react to the master kind of keeling over and dying. And they all kind of look up at Grace at the exact same time. I'm not sure if they were planning on attacking or planning on kneeling or what, but before they got the chance to do anything, Grace lets out this horrific scream that literally just kills every cult member. They all just keel over dead. Again, not a very visceral scene, considering these are the people that have been, marauding and killing and just harassing people this whole movie. We don't really get a very satisfying end for them. But I do like the bleak ending of her now accepting, what was the name? Uktina. Basically accepting Uktina into her body and just basically accepting that I am, basically a god at this point. And I'm going to bring night to the world, hence the title of the movie, The Long Night. In the backstory that they told us, they said that as soon as the human host accepts and can handle the spirit of Uktina, that the long night will begin, basically covering the world in darkness for, however long that this god is out on the loose. We basically see Scout Taylor Compton with her milky eyes walk away from the farmhouse. She actually gets to kind of the property line where the farm actually ends and the rest of the town continues. She stands there and kind of pauses for a minute, looking around, almost like you could tell that the god has tried to leave this property before, because she's kind of standoffish when she gets to the property line. But then she goes ahead and takes that one step over the property line. Nothing happens, and we see her crack this very sly grin. And then basically the camera just shows her walking down the street covered in blood, barefoot, just an absolute mess, and fade to black and credits. And that is The Long Night 2022, my friends. I probably didn't do it justice with my kind of walkthrough because, like I said, I skipped a lot. I skipped a lot of the obvious set pieces that you would normally see in these kinds of movies, cult members trying to get in the house, cult members succeeding in getting into the house, but then getting thwarted by one or both characters, both of our protagonists, things like that. So I didn't really feel the need to go over that, but I did want to go over that ending because, like I said, it is a very bleak ending. It basically implies that the world is fucked. And you know what? I kind of like endings like that. I mentioned I Trapped the Devil from a couple of years ago earlier. That was kind of the same deal. Whereas in that one, they weren't 100% sure of who or what the protagonist of the film had trapped in their basement. But then when we get the reveal at the end, it's a very almost uneventful type of ending. But because of what the ending implies, that the devil is now free and walking around on the earth, I just love that kind of bleakness of it. It's very Lovecraftian, the way I look at it. Just the unknown factor of now there is this omnipotent evil creature that's basically going to just fuck the world up. And even though we don't get to see it, I can accept that as a viable ending for me. I've kind of, regular listeners of the show know that I've kind of railed against vague endings in the past. I don't look at this one as a vague ending so much as a bleak ending, because it's definitely not the ending that horror fans are looking for. They probably want to see, Jack, have this big knockdown drag out with Grace and then kill her violently at the end or something crazy like that. Or even have the snake god maybe reject Grace's body and, tear out of her or something. People are always looking for a more visceral end to cult movies. And this one has just a very subtle end. It's a simple little ending, but it's bleak as hell. And for whatever it's worth, Scout Taylor has actually done a couple of movies in a row now that I do enjoy. So who knows? Maybe I'm coming around on her. Everyone knows how I feel about Rob Zombie's Halloween movies. I don't dislike Rob Zombie as a filmmaker. I know a lot of people do. I just have a problem with his Halloween movies, which can be discussed on another podcast someday, or it won't. Who knows? But yeah, that's it for me on The Long Night. I enjoyed it, and I probably am going to enjoy it more than most people who watch this film. So there you go.
Okay, yeah, I thought you were gonna say I'm probably gonna enjoy it when I watch it again.
Oh, I mentioned that earlier. I don't know that I'll ever watch this again. It's not, it's not particularly fun. It's not particularly visceral or over the top. Like I said, it's a simple little movie with a simple ending. And it's worth that watch for my money. I'm glad I watched it. I did. I may never watch it again, but I am very glad I sat through it, and I'm glad I didn't miss it.
All right. I don't really have any final thoughts on it. I mean, just more along the lines of what I already said. If you like cult movies, check it out. Should be available.
And then there was one little thing that I did forget to mention about this movie that's going to be very glaring to fans of The Shining. There actually is a song from The Shining score in this movie, and it's played early in the film during the driving montage. Go figure. It's not the Shining theme that you hear at the beginning of the film, but it's some music, because I looked it up and it's the same. It's the composer, and it's actually the same song. It's called The Ballad of Jacob. It's both on the Shining score and on this one. Now, at first, I thought it was a ripoff. I thought that the composer was just ripping off the Shining music. So I was like ready to rip this movie apart. I'm like, who the fuck are you to try to rip off The Shining? But then I realized that it actually is the fucking music from The Shining, that it's actually the song. And then I started to change my mind on it. Like, at first I thought, well, that's unoriginal. You're just taking a song off another score to use in your movie. But once that scene was done, I was actually kind of glad they did it, because it does set up a nice tone. Because that whole obviously the music is very ominous. It is from the Shining score. And it beautifully sets a tone, even though this movie does not deserve that song, coming from one of the greatest horror movies ever made. I know Don would disagree with me, but that's okay. I actually really enjoyed that. So if you're a fan of The Shining, look out for that song. I think it happens like maybe 10 minutes into the film or so. But for whatever it's worth, I did enjoy the usage of that.
All right.
I honestly, not until we started recording did I confirm that it actually is from The Shining. Like, I was all set to call it a ripoff, but I looked it up. I looked up the composer, and yeah, it's literally the same song, same composer, Christoph something. I forget his name. It's a German name. But yeah, it is the song from The Shining. So go figure. A little bit of trivia for you.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up our discussion on The Long Night in this episode, but let's find out where everyone can hear us first. So Venom, what do you got coming out that's new?
All right, not much for me, just the same stuff I've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. Episode 7 is available for your ears right now. We look at the 1980 classic from Louis Teague, that is Alligator, one of my favorite creature feature guilty pleasures of all time. I absolutely adore that film, and this was one of the more fun episodes we've had, so check out that one. That is available now on the Dark Discussions Podcast Network. Just last night, we recorded our latest episode of the main show, No More Room in Hell. That was episode number 44. We took a look at Mike's Picks, which was basically a kind of a Deliverance homage episode where we looked at 1977's Rituals and 1981's Just Before Dawn. One of those was a first-time watch for me, and I absolutely loved it, but I'm not going to tell you which one, so you got to tune in. And then as far as guest spots go for me, I recently did an episode of The Dark Parade with Bo Ransdell where we looked at 1981's Hell Night. And I recently did an episode on Cut to the Chase where we looked at the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. Unfortunately, the release of that is going to be delayed because there were some technical issues with the final part of that trilogy. So we're actually going to have to re-record our review for The Dark Knight Rises. And then, I would imagine Dan or Lacey will stitch it all together and put it all out for you. It's going to be a long episode, folks. The episode is longer than all three movies put together. So the Nolan trilogy is about 6 to 6.5 hours. of total content. This episode is over 7. So if you like long podcasts that talk about Batman and comic books, by all means, check out that episode of Cut to the Chase. I don't have a release date for you, but I would imagine it'll be out in the next week or two. So look out for that. And that's it for me, Mike.
All right. How about you, Don?
As mentioned, No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts should be out there. We're still waiting on dates for a couple of other shows of mine. And lastly, the latest episode of Horror Countdown should be available. It is top 10 favorite fat characters in horror films. So this was kind of a fun choice. We had it was kind of weird because we kind of took it up as a no-brainer challenge. Like, oh, okay, well, I know what my list is going to be. And then we both kind of realized, oh, crap, there's not much out there. So it was kind of one of those where we both not only, took it on just to, do something fun and lighthearted, but it was also kind of a way to raise more awareness of the subject in the genre. So if you're interested, go ahead and check it out because we both ended up with kind of surprising lists, and it's one of those where it's a lot of fun. So go ahead and check that out. But other than that, not much else.
When you say fat characters in horror movies, do you mean both antagonists and protagonists, or just heroes? Oh, okay, both. Awesome.
So for those of you that are unaware, one of them is I mentioned Joe Fleischaker from the Trauma series. And we also did Annie Wilkes from Misery. So those were kind of those were choices on the lists. So take that as kind of guiding principles as to where we go.
That is awesome. I wouldn't have even thought of the mayor of Tromaville. Holy shit, great pick.
Mm-hmm. I was done, Mike.
Wake up, Mike.
Oh. Yeah, as far as me, nothing but the main shows for now. So if you need to watch back episodes or listen to back episodes of Fresh Cuts, they're still all up on Dark Discussions and YouTube. YouTube going back a few months now, and then latest episode of No More Room in Hell should be up probably within a day or so of this episode. So, and that's all I got for now. So, is anything releasing of note next week or this end of this week, Venom?
There's a movie dropping on Friday on Shudder called The Cellar. I'm not sure if we're ready to return to Shudder, if we want to maybe give them a little break because they've been fairly disappointing, or look at something else.
There's that. I also know that Let the Wrong One In is available on VOD, which has been getting praise in Duncan's group, Podcast Under the Stairs. I know they're raving about it, and I think it's finally available.
Yeah, I did see that. Literally just before I came on the show, I saw that it's now available to us. So yeah, that's a viable option as well. In fact, we haven't done a horror comedy in a while, so I would probably lean towards that one anyway.
Yeah, there was one other. I just saw it released not last week, but I think like in the last couple of days, and my memory's fading. I think it's a zombie film, but I don't remember the title. And I wrote it down because it was a zombie film, and I don't remember where I wrote the thing down to remember it, so I'm kind of fucked on that end. But
is it Night of the Undead?
I think so.
I saw like a blurb about that.
I think that may be it.
It's Asian, right? The movie I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I don't know which country. I just know it's Asian.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it may be Indian, like
Oh, okay.
Like Indian or like somewhere in that area. I'm not sure, but I'm saying I wrote it down because I wrote it down on a sheet of paper, and I don't remember where the sheet of paper is.
Because I remember because you mentioned it in the chat the other day, and I looked it up and I saw the poster for it, and yeah, it's got Asian text all over it.
Give me 2 seconds. I'm on IMDb right now.
There you go.
But yeah, I like I said, I remember writing it down, and then I did something over the weekend. I recorded a new episode, and I don't remember where because I had to shuffle everything off for my notes. Oh, okay, yeah. This is a Korean film, not Indian. So my bad. So Night of the Undead. If we want to try Tubi, go ahead. I'm not seeing horror, but comedy, sci-fi, thriller looks to be. Maybe this is the wrong movie because this looks like a ghost film, not zombies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this looks more like a ghost movie from what I'm
Okay.
reading. So it's viable, but I'm probably gonna actually lean towards Let the Wrong One In over this one. It's up to you guys, but it looks like it's up to you.
Yeah,
But
we'll figure
it's
it
something to
out. We don't
discuss.
have to
Yeah.
make a decision now.
Yeah, something to discuss. Just looking it up, that looks to be more like a Korean ghost comedy rather than the zombie film I was thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll have to look through the stack of papers that I've got next to my computer here and see where on my sheet of paper I scribbled down because I didn't just include that one. I had like 2 or 3 other titles on there, and I don't remember what they were.
Yeah, I think the Bunker Game was one of them. Let the Wrong One In might have been one of them. And then you mentioned that Undead movie. Might have been one more too, but yeah, those are the ones I remember.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
we got
We'll
options.
we'll
Either
figure
way,
it
we
out.
got options.
Yeah. It's something to discuss for sure.
Yep.
We've got a week, so no rush.
All right. Well,
All right.
that's going to wrap it up for this episode. So we will be back next week with one of the many titles that was just listed, or a totally different one. We will figure it out. So thanks everyone for listening. Catch you next time. Let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Watch out for snakes.
Peace.